Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start, I'd like to ask Ms. Leroy a couple of questions. We get a lot of people who come to this committee who argue that Canada should be more active abroad. And I'm wondering if you could help us think a little bit about the line between supporting democracy and actually going further than that and inadvertently or advertently in some cases interfering in another country's internal affairs.
Thank you, Chair. I think I highlighted this distinction in my remarks where there's supporting democratic transitions and democratic institutions, and then there's also the alternative to that, which is supporting the creation of civic space. When working with political institutions like political parties, legislatures, in almost every single one of those scenarios, you are working with the government, with the approval of the government, and defining programs in a partnership format, in a partnership setting. When supporting or challenging operating spaces trying to create civic space, Iran would be a great example of that. In the past, one of the activities that Canada did incredibly successfully was facilitating international dialogue between the Iranian people and their diaspora in Canada and in country, supporting internet opportunities for them to have conversations and public forums to talk about how they felt about what was happening in that country. Those are two very different initiatives and approaches because the dynamics were extremely different. It also depends on the values of the country that you're operating in. Whereas I've worked in the Middle East, working on women's political participation programming, where governments welcomed and celebrated that programming coming in as an opportunity. And I've worked in programs in the South Pacific, where there was greater concern about how our work to empower women in a political space and public forums was going to change the community dynamics. And I think to that extent, and much like what Kevin was saying, much like what Les was also saying, is it really is a country-by-country dynamic of having that ability to understand what that line is. And if you're going to cross that line, as one could argue that we have by creating civic space in Iran, doing so intentionally. And this is where creating a doctrine and a strategy that's coherent for our country to engage in this work is helpful.
And that's actually a perfect segue into my next question, which is, are there any safeguards that Canada should be putting into place to make sure that our actions are consistent and transparent and sort of fit into international law and don't stray into the kind of foreign interference that we are struggling with in this country?
My argument for that would be the democratic oversight that this committee itself offers and what it is in your mandate, to seek clarification from the Government of Canada, from Global Affairs Canada, in terms of what activities they are doing and how they're approaching their democratic initiatives and their support abroad. You, as members of Parliament, I think are among the best suited to understand that nuance and where that line exists and operates. And so increasing opportunities for engagement through Canadian-led and Canadian-headquartered organizations like Parliamerica's or Parliamentary Centre, or programs that the President-elect has been citing with Journalists for Human Rights, where there's transparency and public discourse about this, that's going to help clarify what those lines are.
The context of, what I've heard you say is that there are circumstances under which Canada should, in fact, support a movement that might lack majority backing or clear majority backing within its own country. And so do you think that the approval or the decision to do that should happen at the executive level? Do you think it should happen at the legislative level? Is this a question for Parliament? Is it a question for the, for GAC? Where do you think the decision making should lie to ensure that we're careful and thoughtful about it?
I will refer back to my remarks where my comment had said that our programming, our political statements, and our multilateral positioning should be aligned. And it's not a straight answer, but the answer is that in all of these places.
I think I'm
going to come back to the example of Venezuela.
But so, I think what I was asking is I realized that was in your remarks. My question is more of the how. We've seen a whole bunch of circumstances. Sometimes things come to Parliament, and sometimes things don't come to Parliament. And so where do you think the locus of decision-making should happen? How do you think we can do this in a way so that we are being most thoughtful about it?
Quick answer, please, because time is off. Thank you.
Yeah. The quick answer is to create a doctrine that delineates who is allowed to choose or who is approving what aspects of the programming.
Through Parliament?